time for bed. Are your teeth brushed? You got pajamas on? Alright. Then tonight, I'm going to be reading The Girl in the Book. Once there was a girl named Emily who loved to read. She read everything she could. Family stories, magic stories, animal stories, but best of all were adventure stories. She liked to think of herself as all the heroes who had amazing experiences in faraway lands. Emily longed to travel to blazing hot deserts, ice-cold realms, and vast empty wildernesses. She wished she could tame bears and hyenas, ride on elephants, and run with tigers. She wanted to know what it felt like to escape a hurricane, a forest fire, a flood, an exploding volcano. The heroes in her books were always wonderfully brave and full of cleverness. They rescued their friends, foraged food, and cooked over fires they made by rubbing flint over straw. They built shelters, and they never, ever complained. They're not like me, thought Emily. Lucky things, I wish I could be like them. Emily's life could not have been more different. She lived in a small house in a quiet street full of other identical houses. She had one sister, Isabella, who was grown up and wrote books. Isabella sat in her room all day, scribbling away, and never played with her at all. Emily's father and mother were quiet, busy people who liked being alone with their thoughts. Her father was an artist, and her mother was a professor. Her father sat painting in a studio, and her mother sat in a study teaching and learning. They were all happy and occupied, and expected Emily to be the same. They didn't want her to bring friends back to the house, as it would be too disruptive, they said, and to create too much noise. So Emily went to school and came home and read her books, and that was how she spent her days. She couldn't help worrying that she wasn't nearly as interesting as the children in her books. She wasn't especially witty. She wasn't an amazing athlete. She never ran along a narrow branch to cross a raging waterfall, or plunge in and out of a deadly whirlpool, or race away from a pack of hungry lions. She was just an ordinary girl in an ordinary house in an ordinary town. But in her imagination, she went everywhere. She sprinted, swam, jumped, rescued wild beasts, and dodged danger over and over again. But sometimes, just sometimes, she felt that even this wasn't enough. If I lived in a book, she thought, I'd be brave and clever and interesting. I'd always say the right thing and act in a wonderful way at just the right moment. Everyone would look up to me. Perhaps I'd discover things about myself I never knew. One day, when Emily had read so much that she was tired of reading, she went up to her sister's bedroom, longing for some human company. But Isabella ignored her. She just stayed at her desk writing, and she didn't even look up. "Hello," said Emily, drumming her finger on the windowsill. "I'm busy," said Isabella. "Sorry. Don't you get bored just writing and writing?" Isabella shook her head and went on writing. "Well, I'm bored," said Emily. She wasn't sure that Isabella had really heard her, so she went on talking, as if she were thinking aloud. "If I could be in a book, an adventure book, I'd be different. I could do anything. My life would be exciting, and I'd be a hero." Said Isabella, looking up for the first time and giving Emily a very odd smile. "Really?" "You're a hopeless sister," said Emily crossly, and she went out, slamming the door behind her. What Emily didn't see was the way Isabella kept smiling after she left the room, or the light in her eyes when she started to write again. Just a few weeks later, Emily began to feel strange. A sort of stiffness spread over her limbs, and sometimes she found herself saying things that weren't like her, or didn't seem to fit with her life, or as if she were rehearsing lines at a play. One morning at breakfast, she heard herself say, "I can climb to the top of that palm tree." Then at school on the playground, she said, "I'm a strong swimmer. I can swim up to that reef." And of course, there hadn't been a palm tree or a reef anywhere in sight. She wasn't even a particularly strong swimmer. Emily began to wonder if it was because she was on her own too much, or if she had simply read too many stories. This went on for some days, and for no one else seemed to notice. Then, one day, without warning, Emily woke up to find that everything around her had changed. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't in her bedroom at all, but on the deck of a ship. White sails billowed in the wind above her. Clouds scubbed across an azure blue sky, while waves splashed and foamed around the sides of the ship. It was a very grand ship, Emily soon realized, full of people in beautiful clothes and sparkling jewels. And when she looked down at herself, she saw that she, too, was in a very grand dress, laced with diamonds. There was a band playing and servants handing out delicious little cakes on silver platters. Gosh, thought Emily. But before she really could take it all in, a raggedy ship sailed into view, its black flags flaunting a skull and crossbones. "Pirates!" cried everyone on the ship. "All hands on deck!" shouted the captain, and they sailed as fast as they could in the opposite direction. But the pirate ship was gaining on them, and very soon pirates in striped jerseys, black trousers, and bare feet leapt on board the ship, grabbed Emily, and ran off with her to their ship. They were laughing evil laughter and crowing with delight at all the jewels they had stolen. Then they bundled Emily below deck, and all she could hear were stomping feet and sea shanties as the pirates celebrated. There was a baby, too, whom the pirates had kidnapped along with Emily. The baby lay next to Emily, gurgling. At first, Emily felt terribly afraid. What would happen to her? What had happened to her? Then the remarkable reason suddenly flashed over her. Isabella had put her into a book. She remembered her sister's odd smile. She was in Isabella's adventure story. She was sure of it. "I am going to enjoy myself," she decided. Except she found she couldn't say the words out loud. Maybe those weren't the words in the book. Maybe she only could say the words that had been written for her. But Emily soon decided that didn't matter, because the book was full of adventures. There wasn't a moment to feel bored. The pirates had captured her and the baby to ransom them, so they'd get a lot of money. But even though they were out and out villains and extremely wicked, Emily found she could deal with them easily. In fact, they admired her courage so much that they begged her to stay with them forever, catching fish and making them laugh and be merry. They even promised, under her guidance, to be less wicked in the future. The girl in the book Emily thought seriously about their offer. She liked living out at sea, with the wind blowing through her hair and the sun on her face. But in the end, Emily in the book decided she didn't want to spend her entire life with pirates. It was time to leave. The pirates, however, began to insist that she stayed, and things were getting awkward when along came a terrible storm. Their boat was nearly overturned, and they were all thrown into the sea. Emily nearly drowned. The water filled her mouth and nostrils, making her choke, but she managed to splutter and cough the water from her lungs, and she quickly recovered. One of the pirates was a weak swimmer, and he nearly drowned too. But Emily the hero saved him and hauled him back on board, forgiving him and all of them for capturing her. Then, when they were all still recovering from the storm, she cut loose one of the little rowing boats hanging from the side of the ship, and taking the baby she made her escape from the pirates. In the little boat, Emily plunged through tempest waves mountains high. She rode past sharks and whales, through pods of dolphins who frolicked enchantingly by her side. Far off, she could see a shoreline. By now she was parched with thirst, and the relentless sun beat painfully on her head. Her limbs ached and her eyes were painfully sore from all the salt water. She was also very tired, but she kept going, chatting to the baby to keep him happy, although he didn't have to say much back. Until, after many hours of rowing, she and the baby finally reached the shore. Emily crawled over rocks, covered in sharp, spiky shells and slippery seaweed, keeping tight hold of the baby, and at last they were safe on dry land once more. Her determination and stamina had carried them through. She had done it. Emily the hero was a winner. It was a glorious feeling, and Emily reveled in it. But there was still work to be done. Emily was now on a deserted island. Quickly she found fresh water in a stream, and a tree plentiful with delicious ripe fruit. She drank and ate, helping the baby, who remained cheerful and gurgling happily. The island turned out to be full of wolves, who growled menacingly as they crept out of the undergrowth at dusk. They sniffed her, creeping closer, baring their fangs. But Emily the hero's intuitive gentleness and understanding of their ways made them accept her. The growls turned into a murmur of welcome. Soon she and the baby were treated as part of the pack. The wolves brought her meat, which she cooked over a fire, made by rubbing two flints together. She was good at this. At night she slept along the wolves, their bodies protecting her, their eyes shining yellow in the darkness, just like the stars that glimmered in the clear night sky above. When Emily first reached this point in the adventure story, she thought as she settled down with the wolves and the baby, "I do hope the book has a happy ending. I'm sure it will. Books like this always do." It did. After 2 weeks on the island, a ship sailed towards the bay. Emily quickly lit a fire, and its smoke signal drew the ship ashore. She was taken abroad and hailed as a hero. She learned there had been a worldwide search for her and the baby, and she was restored to her loving family, famous throughout the land for her unfaltering courage and incredible abilities. The book's final paragraph was about Emily and everyone in the book living happily ever after. And though Emily could only say the words written for her in the book, she could still think of her own thoughts. "I've been brave," she told herself. "It's all been easy. I've known what to do, and I've done it. I've endured hardship and danger, and I've rescued the baby, and I have triumphed. I am a little exhausted, though, after all." Then the person who had been reading the book finished it and shut it with a snap. Emily was thankful to close her eyes and go to sleep. The pirates, the wolves, the baby, the sea, and the storm were all mercifully silenced. But very soon someone else picked up the book and began reading. Emily was jerked awake and found herself back at the beginning of the book, starting with the charming ship and its parties. On came the pirates, laughing and singing, grabbing her and bundling her into their boat. It wasn't nearly as exciting the second time around, because she knew what was going to happen. She didn't really want to get soaking wet all over again, being tossed into the sea when the storm came, but of course she had no choice, and her boat ride with the dolphins holding the baby had lost its thrill. She just wanted to get to the island, out of that hot sun, and stop rowing. She still liked being with the wolves, though, and enjoyed bringing the rescue ship ashore with her smoke signals and being reunited with her family. And everyone saying how wonderful she was. Still, she was glad that this reader read the book very quickly so that she could get some rest when they'd finished it. She didn't rest for long. Immediately she'd come to the end of her adventures, the book was handed to another reader, and then it started again, and 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 again. The book was proving to be a very popular one. Emily was glad, for Isabella's sake, that Isabella had written a bestseller, but every time someone read it, Emily went through all her adventures again, and she got very tired of it. "Do I have to spend the rest of my life with pirates and shipwrecks?" she wondered. "It never stops, and though I like babies, and this one is sweet, I don't want to look after it all the time." After a few hundred people had read the book, Emily had really had enough. She knew the entire book by heart, every word, and the worst part was never being able to say what she wanted. She wanted to talk to the pirates more, to ask them why they'd become pirates, and where they'd come from, and about their families. And she wanted to learn more about fishing. And again, she was getting really interested in living with the wolves, and wished she could have spent longer with them. There was so much to learn and discover. She wanted to know about the birds that flew over the island, and the flowers she had never seen grow everywhere else. But she had to obey the storyline. Isabella hadn't written anything about all the things that now entranced Emily. The book was just an adventure story, pure and simple, with no proper thoughts or feelings explored. It's not enough, thought Emily. I hate not being able to say what I want. I don't want words put into my mouth. I want to speak for myself. Gradually, an idea dawned with her. She must escape from the book. She had a feeling it was going to take far more bravery and courage than her character in the adventure story. All brave Emily, the hero, had to do was to follow the story. But to get out of the story, she was going to have to take a leap into the unknown. Where would she be leaping to? Another book, or a leap to nowhere? Would she vanish altogether, or might she get home? There was no way of telling. More importantly, how was she going to escape? Every line in the book was set in stone. There was no way she could actually change the plot. Somehow, she'd have to strike out for herself. She decided to begin by jumping into the sea from the pirate ship before the storm. Then she could somehow swim away. But it didn't turn out like that. The person reading the book flipped over the pages extremely fast at this point, as though the chapter was so gripping that it had to be gobbled up. Before she could do anything, Emily found herself flung out of the ship as usual, soaked through into the massive, seething flames. This was the worst part in the book. She'd always hated the water filling her mouth and nose and not being able to breathe. Then the person reading the book handed it to someone else, saying, "There, read that exact part where I've been reading, about the shipwreck and the story and the storm and nearly drowning." This was too much for Emily. Nearly drowning all over again, with no rest in between? She wasn't going to allow it. She was filled suddenly with waves, not of seawater in her nose, but of determination. Nothing was going to stop her now. As the waves rocked the boat, Emily clung on tight to the rigging, refusing to be thrown into the water. The pirate stared at her in surprise. "It's no good at looking at me like that," she said. "I'm tired of this. I'm not going to keep saying the words in the book. I'm going to say my own words beginning now." The pirates didn't know what to do. They started shouting as though Emily had unleashed them from their book spell, and they could use their own words too. "Behave! Get back in the water and carry on with nearly drowning. You're ruining the book." I'm going to leave the book," said Emily. "Why don't you come too?" But the pirates looked terrified. "It's safer here," they mumbled. "We know what's going to happen." "Who cares for safety?" cried Emily. "This book's too predictable. Dull. I need something more." All the pirates and the sharks and the dolphins and the wolves and even the baby came together and flung themselves on Emily as if to drag her back to where she would be in the book. Meanwhile, the sea swirled menacingly, getting on with its ferocious storm. The roar of the water and howls from the animals and yells from the pirates rose to a crescendo. "There's something very odd about this book," she heard someone say, like a sound from far away. "It seems all mixed up and strangely noisy." Emily knew this was her moment. The book spell had completely broken. She had a chance to get out, and she had to take it. "Goodbye!" she shouted to the pirates, and the wolves and the dolphins and the sharks and the baby. Summoning all her strength, she leapt out and up and out of the boat. It was like flying. She didn't land in the sea as she'd half feared. Instead, she leapt out of the page, out of the book, and found herself in Isabella's room. As usual, Isabella was writing busily. Emily stood breathlessly before her. "You put me in your book." "I did," said Isabella. "Didn't you like it?" "Well," said Emily, "I loved it at first. It was exciting." But after the third or fourth time, it was dull. I had to do the same things, and I couldn't speak for myself. Oh, said Isabella, thinking it over. Yes, I can see how the excitement might not have last. But thank you for putting me in your book, said Emily, not wanting to sound ungrateful. It was kind of you, sisterly. I wanted to make you happy, said Isabella. But what are you going to do now? If you were bored by your life before, then you will be again. Nothing has really changed. Oh, but it has, said Emily, smiling. Now I know I am not boring or ordinary. And what's more, I'm even braver than the heroes in my books, because I can think for myself. Bravo, said Isabella, cheering. And now, said Emily, I'm going to talk to Mother and Father about allowing me to have some friends over. She paused a moment. Anything else? asked Isabella. Yes, said Emily. I think I'll try writing a book of my own. The end. All right, time for bed. I love you, and I'll see you in the morning. Good night.